Hello and welcome back to this Stateside Soccer Show. I am your co-host, I guess. I've got no host, but I am the co-host usually to Jordan Weekend. But I'm Logan Stump. We're here today to talk match day 24 and 25, and the U.S. men's national team did have some news. Maybe not the news that we were expecting, maybe, but potentially could turn into the news that so many have been waiting for with Gregg Berhalter. So we'll get into that. But first, we're going to discuss match day 24 and 25. Jordan is not again able to join us as he has they've birthed a child. They've birthed a child. He and his wife welcome Landon into. So if you weren't with us last episode, Landon has joined the ranks. So should be expecting him to be on the 2050 roster. So I'm pretty excited about that and to see where Jordan's kid kind of ends up in this. Oh, my cats are deciding to go a little ham right now. But yeah, no, I'm excited to see just how he can come into the fold. You know, we're looking for a striker, so maybe Jordan can get to work on developing his son into a number 9 that we can all love and adore. But all joking aside, we're going to get into match day 24 and 25. There was some big MLS news as far as transfers are concerned, so we'll get into that and talk a little bit about it. And then there was some Nashville SC news as well. We did have a coach hired for Nashville, so I'm actually going to pull that up now because we can talk a little bit about that because it kind of goes hand in hand with the U.S. men's national team. So 6 days ago, this was on July 3rd, so the Wednesday, obviously the day after we record, that tends to happen here on this show. But on July 3rd, Nashville SC announced that BJ Callahan, who was the U.S. men's national team assistant coach, would be joining Nashville SC as the head coach and replaces Gary Smith, who was fired back on May 16th. After guiding Nashville through the first 4 seasons of Major League Soccer, as well as 12 games this year. Callahan officially joins the club on July 22nd ahead of Leagues Cup 2024 and Nashville's SC's match against Mazatlan on July 31st at Geodis Park. Looking at the roster itself, it's pretty similar to what they've had in previous years. You've got Hani Mukhtar, who's going to be obviously your talisman, your special player. But this team's really struggled, and we've talked about and documented just kind of the struggles that Nashville has had. Right, so they've always been kind of that consistent 4 or 5 seed, maybe even better in some of the seasons where they had a sense of direction. But recently they've just not been as good, and they've been difficult to beat at home typically. And this season, they've just not been the same Nashville SC team that we've come to expect in this league. They're one of the best teams in this league when they are firing on all cylinders. They've got one of the best defenders in Walker Zimmerman, who's played and been the defender of the year. You've got Hani Mukhtar, who plays at MVP caliber level. I think their biggest thing was always trying to find somebody that was a goal scorer, somebody that could constantly be a threat in this league. And I think that's what Nashville has really struggled with. Bringing in BJ Callahan, an interesting choice. Just kind of going through and looking at some information about BJ. Obviously, one of his responsibilities was with the U.S. men's national team. He's 43 years old, a New Jersey native, served as interim head coach of the U.S. men's national team last year. They actually did pretty well under him. He led the squad to the 2023 CONCACAF Nations League Championship in the semifinal round of the Gold Cup. He returned to assistant coach role once Gregg Berhalter returned to the national team as the U.S. men's head national team coach. But I really liked BJ as the U.S. men's national team. I think he did pretty well in that role, especially with some of the talent that he's had. And with more and more U.S. players returning to MLS, you've got talent that's coming to MLS. And I think Nashville is kind of on that precipice of breaking through and signing one of these bigger players. I feel like Nashville is one more big player away from being a consistent contender. And I think Nashville will spend. I think they've done a really nice job as far as players that they've brought in. Schaffelberg being one of those. He's currently playing in Copa. He's done a superb job with Canadian national team. So I'm interested to see just kind of the direction that this the U.S. Well, we'll get to that. That this Nashville team is taking. um, because I think BJ Callahan is somebody that can contribute and can really play well, or sorry, coach well in this league. I'm excited to kind of see what that looks like going forward for Nashville SC. So they've got a new head coach. Um, they're stuck in a playoff spot right now. They're on the cusp. Obviously, they're in that number 8 spot, just above Toronto with 26 points. But I think very manageable. They can get into a game where they're not playing that play-in game, and I think that's going to be critical. You'd love to be on the road, or sorry, on home field at Geo's Park, just because it's so difficult to play in Nashville when it comes to MLS. And I think it's tough to travel anywhere. But again, they've just not been as good as home. And at home, it's important to. I mean, it's important to really kind of dominate at home. I mean, you look at some of the best teams in the league, and they don't lose at home really. So that's something that they've really struggled with. I think uh, again, they just don't have enough scoring options. They've only scored 25 goals this season, and they've only allowed 31. It's not like they're shipping goals left and right. I mean, they're not one of the best defenses this year that they usually are, and they've dealt with a lot of injury. I remember when we started the season that I think there was like 8 players that were hurt, and I think 6 or 7 of their starting 11. I remember the picture that they tweeted early on in the season when it's like all of the players sitting up in like a suite because they were all hurt um, coming back from the summer. So Nashville trying to get healthy. I think bringing in more players, infusing it with more talent. They've done a nice job kind of picking off younger pieces from different teams. So I think that's essentially what Nashville needs to do: build something, build a core. They've got a good defense still. Kind of maybe refresh that, retool that a little bit. Definitely retool the midfield, get more creative in the midfield with Hani Mukhtar leading the way in that spearhead. And then you've got to find a striker. You got to find a number 9 that's going to be more consistent. Again, they've just really, really struggled with goal scoring. I mean, ever since we've been covering the league, their defense has been stout. They've had one of the best creative midfielders in the league. Now, can they find somebody to bang in 15 to 20 goals? I think Sam Sturridge is a good striker. I'm not sure he's elite. So I think that's kind of, he needs somebody, like, he needs somebody like a double striker, or maybe it's a better striker and he comes off the bench. I just, I'm not sure that he's that attacking player that takes you to the next level. And if Hani Mukhtar is not scoring, then really nobody's scoring on the team. Because I mean, it's just if you look at their stats, I mean, look at this: like Boyd 1 goal, Godoy 1 goal, Mayer 1 goal, Shaq Moore 1 goal, Alex Mule 1 goal, Schaffelberg 1 goal. You got a lot of 1 goals. Teal Bunbury is the only one that has more than 1 goal, aside from Hani Mukhtar and Sam Sturridge. So again, I think it's going to be important for Nashville to go out and get a striker. It's going to be important for them to build around BJ Callahan. But I've got full confidence in the fact that BJ Callahan seems to be a really good option. I do. I think he's got exactly what they need. Um, he seemed to really infuse some sparks and um, really motivated the U.S. men's national team in ways that I don't think Gregg's done at all. So, be interested to see how that translates over. Um, just kind of looking around. I don't think obviously BJ's had a head coaching job at or in MLS, so this will be his first. But really looking forward to it. Can't wait to see what Nashville does. They again sit 8th and are looking to move up. But just want to go over that first because that was the first thing that popped into my head. Um, I wanted to talk about that. We'll get into some MLS, so deeper into MLS. So let's talk some scores first because we had 2 match days this last week that we're going to cover. We'll talk more in general about teams since in these weeks it's hard to go game by game just because it gets confusing as to which game you're talking about, and then you start talking about one game and then the next game they struggle. So let's just talk in general about these teams and the results that they've had. It is summer. A lot of these players are in Copa still or at the Euros. They're going to start coming back within the next couple of weeks, so you're going to start to see more of a return to normalcy for MLS. But I did want to go through some scores, and then we'll go through the standings, and then we'll talk about the teams. We did have a major signing that we'll discuss, and then We're going to talk a little bit about U.S. men's national team because some things have happened, and we're currently in a holding pattern when it comes to U.S. men's national team. We tried to delay this pod a little bit. I was out of town in Chicago this last weekend. Speaking of Chicago, that was an exciting game on Wednesday, July 3rd, as we were following that at one of the beer gardens that we were at. That was a lot of fun being in the city and actually following it with Andrew, who is a listener and a fan of the Chicago Fire. So it was kind of cool to see his perspective on how exciting that game was. Maybe not so exciting for my co-host Jordan because it was his Philly team that, or the ones that were at the end of that exciting game in Soldier Field. So, yeah, let's go through the results first. Then we'll go through standings, and then we'll go through a little bit of discussion about the top teams and some of the teams that we really feel played well this week or these last two match days. And then we'll talk Thiago Halmada, and then we'll get into some U.S. men's national team stuff. So July 3rd, uh, Charlotte loses to Miami 2-1 at Bank of America Stadium. DC loses to Cincinnati at Audi Field. NYCFC beats Montreal at Citi Field 2-0. You've got Toronto dropping a game at BMO Field against Orlando City 2-1. New England winning over Atlanta 2-1 in Gillette. The Chicago Fire beating the Philadelphia Union, like we talked about, 4-3 at Soldier Field, and one of the probably the most exciting games over the last couple of weeks, to be honest with you. Just kind of following along with that. You've got the Vancouver Whitecaps that beat the Minnesota Loons 3-1 at Allianz Field. St. Louis City SC beating San Jose the Quakes 2-0 at City Park. Columbus beats Nashville 2-0 at Lower.com Field, and Salt Lake City 3-2 over Houston at America First. And then going down to Thursday, we had Dallas beating Portland 3-2 on the 4th of July. Colorado beating Kansas City 2-1 at Dick's Sporting Goods, and then LA Galaxy losing El Trafico to LAFC at the Rose Bowl 2-1. I want to try to pull up. You know what? I meant to do this. I meant to pull up the attendance. I want to see what the attendance was at that match because I never saw a final attendance count because it was at the Rose Bowl. People were tweeting about it early on, and then like somebody's picture took, I don't know who, I can't remember whose Twitter it took off from. It was one of the beat writers, I think, was talking about like the attendance and stuff like that, and it showed like an empty stadium, and it was 3 hours before the game or 2 hours before the game, so that like obviously it was a picture taken before when the press got into it, into the game, and then it obviously reflects that nobody was at the game, which would be hard to believe because it's July 4th. But looking at the attendance, I don't see it. Like, where do you find MLS attendance? Like, is that a thing? Where do you go to see this? I'm trying to find it. I don't know. Where is it? Oh, there we go. 70,000 and 76. So a massive, massive showing for. I wonder if is that close to a record. You or MLS. My cat's trying to break out again. MLS attendance record. I don't remember what it was. I think we talked about it recently, actually, because MLS record. But I would say that's got to be up there, right? Like, of course, this is going to be impossible to find. Um, okay, 2023, the same Rose Bowl. So actually, it had less fans than last year. Last year, they had 82,110 fans. So I don't know. I don't know if it's because Copa was taking place and people were home watching Copa, which I imagine that might have been a thing. People were watching the Copa game because I think that was the Argentina Ecuador game. So maybe people weren't going out to LA and LAFC. It was July 4th. I know that last year did well, but it's kind of hard to pull people away from July 4th plans at times. It was a Thursday. I don't know when July 4th was last year, so that might have something to do with it. But yeah, I mean that 12,000 less. I mean, that's quite a bit. So, did not break a record, but that's still a lot of people to go see an MLS game. I will say that 70,000 we don't get. They don't get 70,000 people watching MLS games, so it's really exciting. But LAFC again win El Trafico. Saturday you had Cincinnati slaughter Miami 6-1. TQL Stadium. Columbus Crew beat Toronto 4-0. Montreal and Vancouver draw. Orlando City beat down DC United 5-0. Philadelphia Union draw with the Red Bull 0-0. Salt Lake City 5-2 over Atlanta. Austin FC beats NYCFC 2-1. Seattle 2-0 over New England. You had Houston that was rained out Sunday, the 7th, because of the hurricane that came through. Kansas City 3-2 over Dallas. You had San Jose 1-0 over Chicago. Colorado 4-1 over St. Louis. LA Galaxy 2-1 over Minnesota. And then Portland 4-1 over Nashville. So, where does that leave us as far as the standings are concerned? So, Eastern Conference, you've got FC Cincinnati sitting currently on top at 48 points. So they have now taken sole possession of that number one spot in the Eastern Conference from Miami after their beatdown of Miami in Cincinnati. Miami drops to second, 47 points. Columbus, 39 points in third. Red Bull, 36 points in fourth. NYCFC, 35 points in fifth. Charlotte at 32 points in sixth. Orlando City, 27 points and seventh. They are above the playing game and in the playoffs. And then you've got Nashville SC at 26, which we talked about in the eighth spot. Toronto FC, 24 points in the ninth spot. Atlanta United, 24 points in the 10th spot. Montreal, 23 points in the 11th spot. In the 12th, New England with 22. 13th, Chicago, 21 points. You have Philadelphia Union in the 14th spot with 21 points. DC United at the bottom of the table in the Eastern Conference with 20 points in that 15 spot. So, Western Conference, moving on. LAFC, 43 points in first. RSL tied with LAFC in second with 43 points, and tied with them, LA Galaxy in the third spot with 43 points. So, the goal differential is going to be, is it a goal or no? It's the points per game, right? Isn't it? Or is it wins? No, it's wins, I believe, in MLS, right? Because it's, yeah, total number of wins. I always get that confused, because Premier League and most leagues do goal differential, which is odd, but I like the wins, honestly. I think the MLS does it right, so the MLS does it right. Um, so Colorado, 37 points in fourth. Portland, 33 points in fifth. Vancouver, 32 points in sixth. Seattle, 31 points in seventh. And then in the eighth spot, you got Houston with 30 points. And eighth spot, Houston with 30 points. Ninth spot, Austin with 30 points. Minnesota United have dropped out of the playoffs now, and they are sitting 10th with 29 points. In 11th spot, you got Dallas, and they've got 23 points. St. Louis in the 12th spot with 22 points. 13th is SKC with 20 points. And then the Wooden Spoon, current Wooden Spoon winner, I guess, and loser, I guess, at this point, would be San Jose with 14 points. I don't think there's going to be a team worse than San Jose that finish out the year. They're atrocious. They are absolutely awful. So I think we could probably prematurely give them the wooden spoon, right? I mean, I think we might all agree with that one. So congratulations, San Jose. You've done it again. But I mean, looking at the tables, some surprises, right? I mean, if I'm looking at this table, obviously Philadelphia Union, we talk about that quite a bit on this show because of Jordan's fandom with the Philadelphia Union, but also they're a really good topic to talk about. I feel like even as a neutral, you're like, what's wrong with Philly? I mean, Jim Curtin has had some issues. I know there's been a lot of discussion where Jim Curtin has talked multiple times, and I think recently, again, in a press conference, talked about bringing players in and selling players off and building a team. And he's had a difficulty building the team because he can't quite get the players that he wants to get. So it sounds like Sugarman's having some issues because one, if you've seen, and we can talk about this a little bit, there were signs that were like Sugarman out, or the sugar, it's no longer sweet, Sugarman out kind of signs and stuff. Very, very brilliant science, I guess. But it does leave fans with the sour taste, and a lot of times they'll go after owners. And we've talked about it on this podcast that the union get to a certain point where they are a little hesitant to spend. They rely heavily on building from their youth academy and building from, some cast offs from different European systems or guys that they recruit that are not as, I guess, as expensive or as well known, so they're not spending as much, which has always been a concern for smaller market teams. Like Philly's not a huge market team. Like Philly is not a team that's going to spend a crap ton like you've got with LAFC, LA Galaxy, Cincinnati. Even Cincinnati spends a lot of money. Miami spends a lot of money. Atlanta will spend a lot of money. Philly's not in that category. Philly is kind of in that second tier, I would say, kind of like what, maybe like an Orlando City or I don't know, like a Toronto or even New England, those kind of teams, right? Who have got good owners and owners that own NFL teams or owners that are involved in investment banking or whatever it might be. They've got good money. I'm not saying that they don't have money. I'm saying that the spending is where I think the concern is, right? And I think that's where a lot of Philadelphia Union fans sit with Sugarman and where Jim Curtin is clearly frustrated with the ways that he's not been able to build teams, the ways that some of the like they had huge contract issues going into this season. Like Kai Wagner, huge contract issues. Andre Blake, Bedoya, like they've had issues signing some of their players back, and I think part of that's Jim Curtin not wanting the players back. I think, or maybe like wanting to move on, or could be the opposite where he wants those players back and they're just not willing to spend. But either way, Jim just seems to be frustrated every time that he talks with the media and is asked about players. And it's always this time of year, right around the transfer windows, where Jim really does voice his frustrations that the team's not as talented as it need to be, that they need to do some work. He kind of sounds like he's handcuffed, right? So I don't know. I don't know what happens. Ah, if they continue on this pace, like I meant to ask Jordan this because I knew I was going to talk about the Union some, but I would wonder what mini takes were on is Jim Curtin at the end of his line? Like, who's the scapegoat? Because it's usually the head coach. It's not usually ownership, right? Because ownership's not just going to sell the team. Sorry, I had to take a drink, but I don't know. I think the Union are in a really really bad spot, really precarious spot. They've got an older roster. Most of their guys are in the end of their prime or out of their prime, I would say. Um, Almost at every position. And in the positions that they're not, they're players that are gonna be on the move. Carran's is gone already, right? So they lose their striker option. And Philly's scored 36 goals. So it's not like they're lacking tremendously in the goal category. They're not as good as the top teams, yes. But it's not like, they could be worse is what I'm saying, I guess. They're kind of in that middle of the pack where you would think they would be higher, but because defensively they've not been as good as they had been, and we talked about that some too. It's like eventually these defenders, this really good defense that Philadelphia has, is going to lack and is going to go backwards and regress. When you've got guys like Jose Martinez and Gazda, or not Gazda, I don't know why I said that, Glesnes and Jack Elliott, yeah, you're running the risk of them eventually hitting a wall. And I think that's what they've done. They've had some injury issues, got an aging roster, you've got more competitions because of CCC. I mean, there's a lot of factors I think with the union, and I'm not sure Jim's completely bought it. And they've had some issues internally in the locker room where you've had Bedoya getting on some of the other players because they've not been giving it their all. You've had some arguments. You've had all these reports that the union players weren't happy, and I don't know. It just seems like it's been a perfect storm for their not their success, their failures this year, and we are seeing it. And they're very, very close to being the last place team in the Eastern Conference, which I don't think I ever thought I would say that. At least in the next couple of years, with at least, I mean, still, you've got a good core. They're just aging, but man, there's just a lot wrong with this Union team. They don't win at home. They've won one game at home this year. That's incredible because they are a very good home team. And that's kind of where the problem is, like where you see the glaring issues. They cannot win games at home. And you've got to collect points here in MLS when you're at home. So yeah, Philadelphia Union really, really struggling. So I guess that's kind of the first, we've dove into that we're shocked by. I think a good shock buy. RSL continue to do things that just impress me. I feel like they've got a really good team. They've got Chicho, they've got Diego Luna. I mean, this team is so solid. They score a lot of goals. They don't give up a lot of goals. They've only given up 27 goals this year. I mean, the RSL has been phenomenal. I mean, we we talk about them quite a bit lately, and it's because of how good they've been. I mean, you're looking at a team that didn't start out the season real great, kind of hovering in the different playoff spots, and now all of a sudden made a supercharge up to the top of the table and are now tied with LAFC at the top of the table, who LAFC has been the best team in MLS, I think, for the last couple of weeks. So you're talking about an RSL team keeping pace with one of the best teams in the league right now. They're just as good. LAFC is just as good as Miami and Cincinnati have been over the last couple of months, probably better. Actually, yes, they are better. They LAFC has had the last 2 months, they have been better than Miami and Cincinnati, and RSL is still there. They've gone through a little bit of tough stretches at times, but they bounce back pretty quickly. They don't drop points. I think that's a big thing. They don't usually lose. They're picking up draws when they have to. They're picking up wins when they need to. Like, I don't know. I'm just really impressed with this team. I think they've got a good, solid core. I think they even add a piece. I mean, this could get to where RSL we're talking about them being the sleeper pick in the MLS Cup playoffs because I think they're that good. I think they're kind of like what Columbus is in the Eastern Conference, where I would not want RSL in a playoff game. I would not. They defend extremely well. They play well against good teams too. They're known to beat good teams or at least stick with good teams. So I'm excited to see them in a playoff game because I think you'll really get battle tested, and I think they need some more battle testing. While they can beat good teams, I think they've got to prove that they can beat them consistently in a competitive environment like the playoffs. I think that's where their next step is. I think their growth is going to be there. So I'm just excited to see what RSL does in the MLS Cup playoffs. They've got good young players, got exciting players, got a really exciting attack that I don't think a lot of people talk a whole lot about just because you're constantly talking about the LAFCs or the Inter Miami and Cincinnati because they've been exciting for a couple of years. Whereas RSL, I mean, people sleep on them all the time. I mean, we're talking about a team that's starting to get to a point where they're consistently good. I mean, Chicho's got 17 goals, Gomez has 11 goals, Julio has 6 goals, Diego Luna 5 goals. Like, the dudes just score, and then when they're not scoring, they're creating. I mean, Chicho Arango has 11 assists. That's 28 goal contributions. Gomez has 20 contributions. Diego Luna has 17 goal contributions. Like, this is easily one of the best 3 attacking player. Like, I'm trying to think, like, besides I wanna say Miami's tough because they got 2, that are extremely good and probably the 2 most elite in the league right now when they do come back. But, like, you're talking about RSL, you're talking about some really good players, in a 3 head like, almost a spear in that attack, right? That just wear opponents out. Good pace, lots of versatility, nose for goal, nose for getting guys in good positions, all 3 of them. Like, you don't get that often where you've got 3 creatives that score a lot of goals, and those 3 are some of the most creative. I'm shocked Diego Luna has been left off the US men's national or youth national team, I guess you could call him, in the Olympics. Diego Luna did not get called in, and he's not been very happy about that. Um, so, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. We'll talk US getting into the Olympics, and then we'll cover them when they actually get to the Olympics, which start in a couple of weeks. But again, I'm shocked that Diego Luna did not make the Olympic team because he's just been that good. Um, I mean, Georgi Mihailovic, I think he's better than Georgie. He's better, a lot better than Georgie, which isn't saying anything on Georgie, but I think I mean, he belongs because he is better than some of these players that we'll get into when we talk the youth roster that they announced for the Olympics. Looking at other teams, maybe that we want to talk about. LAFC continue to roll. They've beaten the LA Galaxy now. They've beaten Colorado 3-0. They absolutely torched San Jose 3 games in a row that they've won. And one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine of their last 10 they've won. That's absolutely absurd. That doesn't happen in MLS. So It's been crazy, like, and they've been shutting teams out. I mean, not letting teams score either, and they've scored a lot. So, um, man, I think it I guess we can kinda get into it now. We're gonna get into a point with this year that while the rest of the league seems to kind of have regressed, like, I think honestly, I think there's a huge gap between I'm looking at now, I think there's 6 teams right now that legitimately have a chance. I would say the other ones, I think we might get like a 1 and 1, like a 1 seed. Like, I'm starting to feel like that's the way it's going to be because of how good the 1 seeds are. But also, I think we're gonna get no underdogs, which will be wild. But I think we're at a point right now in MLS where the teams that they would be playing, the underdogs are significantly better or sorry, significantly worse than the teams that they'd be playing that are the favorites. I think we're at that point right now. Now things change, right? Somebody gonna get hot. Is Red Bull gonna get hot? Is NYCFC gonna get hot? Or NYCFC, I think that's the other thing is NYCFC, they've they had been struggling, because they went on a 5-game heater, and then they lost 3 straight, and then they picked up 2 wins. So they've been really inconsistent. Like, that's just been the tale of NYCFC for a long time. But if they get again, they're I always feel like they're one good player, like a Tati or Castellanos, kinda like what they had. One of those really good elite strikers away from being a team that could make some noise, and one of those teams that I don't think on paper would be as talented as some of the top teams, but I think would be scary enough in a one-off game you wouldn't wanna play them. Because right now, I mean, seriously, right now, I'm looking at the teams that would be okay, so let's if the playoffs started today, right? Cincinnati or sorry, Nashville and Toronto would play each other in a playing game. I almost would think I would have more confidence in Toronto winning this game, right? So we'll move Toronto through. Even if we move Nashville, it doesn't matter. Well, whoever you want to move in, 8 and 9, we'll move them in, right? And they're going to end up playing the number 1 seed. Number 1 seed is Cincinnati. Neither of those teams are beating Cincinnati in TQL. I don't think. Miami would play Orlando. I'm an Orlando City guy, but there ain't no way. I don't think we've beaten them since, right? Messi's been here. Um, they would absolutely kill us. They killed us this year. It's just not even been close when Miami and Orlando have played. And even when Messi wasn't here, it wasn't a good game. So yeah, I'm going Miami over Orlando. Columbus would play Charlotte. Columbus has been one of the best teams in the last couple of months. They're almost to a point where they're up there because they've only got 20 games played, right? So they've got 2 games in hand on Cincinnati, 3 games in hand on Miami. If they win 2 of those games, that's 45 points. If they win 3 of those games, it's 48 points. They'd be tied with Cincinnati. So obviously, Cincinnati has a game in hand too, so they'd be at least 3 points down from Cincinnati, um, or at most 3 points down from Cincinnati. But I would say Columbus would beat Charlotte. I think this would be the only game that you'd have some, and much like you would in any playoffs. The 4 and 5 are always a tight game. Red Bull versus NYCFC. That one could go either way, but Red Bull are 6-0-4 at home, whereas NYCFC have only won 3 games on the road. I would have to give the favor to Red Bull. I think Red Bull, they have allowed the same amount of goals, but I still feel like Red Bull have the better defense out of the 2. Um, so that's a toss up, right? That's where one of the underdogs could win. Because after that, the only other chance that you would have right now would be Miami beating Cincinnati, but Cincinnati seems to have done pretty well for themselves against Miami recently. So again, you get Messi back. That would probably be the upset there, obviously, but I still think Miami, even though they've got a game or Cincinnati's got a game in hand on Miami, I don't know, I still feel like Miami for some reason wins the Eastern Conference unless Messi and Suarez have to miss a lot of time coming back from Copa, which does happen quite a bit. I mean, if you ever watched World Cup and then some of those players come back from World Cup and go to their club teams after the summer, they'll take like a 2 or 3 week extended break. So I could actually see Messi and Suarez taking an extended, maybe not Suarez because Suarez hasn't played as much, but I could see Messi definitely taking a longer break, kind of like a hiatus where he doesn't play as much. And then once Miami feels like they've got home field advantage kind of locked in and they maybe don't feel they could get the number 1 seed, if that becomes the case, then they'll back down. I think it will just depend on how close Columbus is. I think. I mean, honestly, I think Miami's going to be fighting for home field advantage the whole time. They said they want to win Supporter Shield, but I'm not sure that they're going to. If Cincinnati keeps pace, I've got more. I've got more optimism in the fact that they would keep pace and be able to stay because they're younger and healthier. Miami just they've always got nagging like tons of guys get hurt on Miami. They still keep winning, but they can't keep doing that. It's not sustainable. But then you look at the Western Conference, right? I mean, there's a huge gap between the first team and the fifth team because the first team, like I mean, I guess it's actually worse in the Eastern Conference. I didn't realize that. But I mean, there's a huge gap, but I think there's a huge gap talent wise as well. LAFC, I think they would absolutely dominate Portland if they ever somehow got to Portland, like which they would if they beat Colorado. And Colorado can't defend either, so it's like I mean, again, the reason why I keep doing this is or going on and on about these is just I just don't feel like the underdogs this year are as good as in years past. Because usually, like last year, you had SKC bounce St. Louis from the one spot because SKC was one of the hottest teams coming to the playoffs. Of course, it's going to take some time. Of course, it's going to be 2 3 weeks out. And team gets hot, they get in the playoffs, and then they could roll one of these top teams. And it's soccer, and it's one game, so anything can happen, right? But that being said, I really do feel like there is a tremendous gap in talent and a tremendous gap that will come for some of these teams at the top of the conferences. You've got three of the best teams in the Western Conference, I think, and RSL, LAFC, and LA Galaxy because I would put the two in the East better than them, but I don't think Columbus right now is better than LAFC, RSL, and LA Galaxy. LA Galaxy might be the team that they beat, but again, Columbus, because they had a bad start, um, that's where I think some of the concern is, right? So could they go through kind of a spell like that again? Maybe. Maybe we're not talking about Columbus as hotly in a couple of months when the playoffs come, but I don't know. A lot of things could happen. We're 20, probably 22-ish games, I would say, even though we're match day, 24 and 5 this episode is. Um, I would say the average number of games played are 22 right now. Throughout the league seems to be the most number. The mode, right? They call that the mode. Then you got the mean would be the average. The mode would be how many, uh, the most that it appears. Yeah. There goes my math brain. Um, yeah, so I really do. I think that it's going to get interesting. You got what 38 games, so yeah, a lot of time. But that being said, um, not maybe not as much time as you would want for some of these teams because I really do think there's a huge gap. 34 games, right? Yeah, 34 games. Not sorry, I lied. Not 38 games, 34. So you got 12 games left. I mean that's gonna go by quick. 12 games. 12 games, that would be 4 weeks per month. So, wow, we're getting close, aren't we? It's already July. Holy cow. Um, middle of July. But yeah, no, this is gonna get real interesting. There's gonna be some fighting, some clawing, some different things that are happening at the top of the league and around the league, I guess. Um, but yeah, is there anything else that I want to talk about as far as just kind of teams that we're shocked about? I think we kind of hit on all of them, really. Maybe a team that's not I mean, New England's that's old news. They're just not good. I don't know what happens with Caleb Porter. I think Caleb Porter gets another year at least, because I think though he'll get some players and then are his because he really doesn't have players that are his. Um, let's see. Is there any transfer news? Let's go see because it'll lead right into our good conversation that we'll have about Almada. But I want to see has there been any transfer news that we've gotten for MLS clubs? Because I don't want to miss anything. No, no. These are all moves out. Stipe Buke to Real Valladolid. I don't know how to say that. We're going to talk about that one. DC United did sign Dominic Baji. That's kind of fun. DC United acquire Austrian defender David Schnegg. I don't know much about David, but David was acquired. Um, Yeah, I don't really see anything else that we've kind of missed, honestly. We haven't really talked much transfer, which is kind of weird. But I think a lot of that has to do with teams or club or sorry, players being at Copa and stuff. There's not been a lot of discussion with some of these players and their agents, but I'm sure it will pick back up very soon because Copa is coming to an end. I think next week. Yeah. Yeah, this Sunday, I believe. So yeah, not much transfer news except for one, right? And we're going to actually talk about this one because it was huge. This is a huge move. This is one that we felt like was coming. We did their season preview, um, and we've talked with multiple people in Atlanta United about this, as far as the people that cover it, and we knew it was coming. It was just a matter of when. So Thiago Almada has officially moved on from Atlanta United. He's transferred to Brazilian top flight Botafogo, which is a shock because they were not anybody that was ever interested in him. I honestly thought that Almada would end up somewhere in Europe, but here comes the Brazilian top flight team. And for an MLS record fee, the club announced on Saturday, July 6th, that he would be sold for $16 million, um, which is, or sorry, no, that was what he came over for. That's what he came over for. What? Atlanta, Almada, 2020, joined Atlanta United for a reported. Yeah. How much did he sell for? Where did that number go? Oh, there we go. Um, he beats he beats Almiron's deal. Okay, I gotta pull this back up. I lost the number. Uh, How do I not have a number? Like it just but all these articles keep telling me how much he came over for Atlanta United. 16 million. Hold on. I'm so confused right now. Why does it say that? Why does it It keeps telling so what's happening in all these articles, it keeps telling me how much he came over to Atlanta United for. It was 16 million back in the day, 2022 when he came over. Oh, there we go. Well over $20 million. Okay. So I think I read somewhere it became, yeah, he became the MLS top sell, um, beating his former, or I guess not former, beating his compadre that used to play there in Almiron. So yeah, a huge move. Almada was massive for Atlanta United, tallied 23 goals and 33 assists in 77 regular season games. So an absolute huge sell. His creative ability, his vision, he was a game changer. Probably one of the most exciting players to watch. He was not as good this year, but I think a lot of that was Atlanta United is just not very good this year. And Yakamaki's when he left, and I don't know, that team just seemed like a collection of good pieces that just didn't work together because they've got some good young talent and good players there. But again, like they really just struggle with behind Gonzalo Pineda, who was fired. So I'm interested to see what Blank does with all this money now because he's gotten some good money from Yakamaki's, got some really good money from Almada. He's going to be able to spend, and he was already spending a lot of money. And Arthur Blank's got a blank checkbook, basically. The guy spends a lot of money. So we'll see what Atlanta United does. I'm excited. They're basically cleaning house, and they're going to be pretty bad, I would say, for the next year or two. But after that, be interested to see what Arthur Blank brings in. So yeah, Almada officially out. The Argentinian out. He was at Copa of Atlanta United and moving on to the top Brazil side of Botafogo. Okay, so let's move on to some U.S. men's national team, U.S. Olympic roster news. So the U.S. Olympic roster was announced today, or not today, was announced, and we do have a final roster that they'll be taking to the Olympics to compete in Paris 2024. So goalkeepers Patrick Schulte and Gaga Slonina. You got defenders Maximilian Dietz, Nathan Harriel, Miles Robinson, John Tolkien, Kayla Wiley, and Walker Zimmerman. Midfielders Gianluca Busio, you have Benjamin Kermashi, Georgi Mihailovic, Jack McGlynn, Tanner Tessman. Forwards Paxton Aronson, Taylor Booth, Duncan McGuire, Kevin Paredes, and Griffin Yao. Alternates are Josh Atencio, Jake Davis, Johan Gomes, and John Pulskamp. Um, Really excited about this roster, honestly. These are some players that I think, looking forward, I think we see some of these guys that will feature in the first team, obviously, but I think will challenge some of these guys that are currently on the first team roster. I think that we've got some good scoring options like Duncan McGuire. I think Griffin Yao is really interesting. Kevin Paredes pretty interesting there. Paxton Aronson had a good run. You've got great midfielders like Kramashi, Jack McGlynn, Tanner Tessman's been rumored in a lot of huge moves throughout Italy. Talking about some of the top Italian clubs like Milan and them looking at Tanner Tessman for their option for defensive mid. Gaga Slonina is probably the one that I'd highlight the most because I think he and Caleb Wiley possibly as defenders and goalkeeper, obviously Gaga, as being those guys that could make the first team roster here in a couple of years as backups. But man, I mean, this team is pretty loaded. I'm excited to see what they do in um, the Olympics because they're going to be playing some really great teams. Like I think the youth France team is the one that's favored, but U.S. men's national team should compete in this tournament. We'll see how they do. I mean, it's pretty good measuring stick because it'll put us up against some teams, younger teams that, they're the future of their teams as well in the World Cup. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what this team has in store. Again, that starts, I want to say, when is the U.S. men's soccer Olympics schedule? Because I think we have it. I just don't know for sure. I want to double check. So it looks like all right, so this is the whole. Yeah, I don't need the whole U.S. Olympics, like all sports. That's crazy. Um, let's see. I don't think we have a full schedule. I don't know. I don't know. But it does start very soon. The Olympics in Paris. So really looking forward to that. Obviously, they have some players that are not under 23. They will open their sorry, there we go. They will open their play on July 24th against host France, then meet New Zealand and Guinea. Two of the top nations in each group advance to the quarterfinals. So we'll see. Um, those are some pretty good. That's a pretty good group when you have to go up against France, but I think the other two teams they can beat. So we'll see. Again, it'll be pretty interesting watch. July 24th is when that starts. It should be on Peacock, I believe, is where those are broadcasted. So we'll talk about that. We'll cover that on here. But did not do enough research because I'd forgotten. I knew I had their roster, but I'd forgotten to kind of dive into that one. Um, we'll talk. We will now talk the biggest news of it all. And that was on July 3rd, I believe it was. No, July 5th. I want to say it was July 5th because I was trying to think of where I was in Chicago. But on July 5th, I believe it was on a broadcast for, was it Copa? It was one of the two. It was Copa or US Men's National. Or it was, I believe it was Copa because it's on Fox. I don't know. It could have been the Euros too. Either way, it was announced on Fox that a decision for Gregg Berhalter was going to be made this week, this midweek. Sorry. So currently, what we're in, I could release this podcast tonight, and the news might break tonight or tomorrow morning, and this becomes old news. And you probably know what's happened or what's going on with U.S. men's national team. We're currently recording this on Tuesday, July 9th. So I mean, they said midweek and midweek would be Wednesday, I would think. I don't think it'd be Thursday. So you might be listening to this, and this might be some old news. But Gregg Berhalter, the future is going to be announced from the U.S. Soccer Federation. I don't think they come out and say this unless they're going to fire Gregg Berhalter. The reason why I think it's going to be that's this long, they didn't fire him right after, was because I think the U.S. Federation wants to know in which direction they're heading in, because fans are going to be worried. Um, and if they don't at least announce a coach when they fire him within the next day or two after firing him, or don't do it right away, then you're going to get that we are in an intense search, which means they probably already reached out to the candidates that they want to see if there's interest. I think it's going to come down to Doug McIntyre, who I can't remember who exactly he reports for. Let me check just to make sure that I get this right. Doug McIntyre reports U.S. men's national team. Um, his connection, yeah, Doug McIntyre has deep connection with U.S. men's national team, U.S. soccer. His report with Jimmy Conrad confirms that U.S. soccer hasn't made a final decision. This was back a couple days ago. Hasn't yet made a final decision. This was over on July 6th, but um, he thought it was going to happen Monday. I think it's already happened. Uh, I think they release this information Wednesday, tomorrow. I think it comes out tomorrow, if not tonight. There is a game tonight. A Canadian team Our Canadian team plays Argentina at 8 o'clock. So I wouldn't be shocked if it happens at halftime of that game or during that game, even the pregame. I could see this being some great pregame content. U.S. men's national team seems to be okay with doing that. I think they want to broadcast it. I think they want to broadcast it, and once they want to go live with it on one of these pregame or halftime shows, or at least make it known so that they can talk about it on the halftime show, because I think they want the reaction. They like for some I feel weird about this, but like it's almost like they want to champion the fact that they're firing Gregg Berhalter, which is just wild to me that they even hired him in the first place again. Um, now that I look at what's happened, but yeah, so it sounds like Greg's out. Just a matter of when. The reason why they think it might take long enough to kind of get the next coach or the next one moving in is it sounds like the U.S. men's national team will approach Jurgen Klopp's party. They'll ask him, he'll say no, and then they'll move on to a more realistic coach. And I think that coach is going to be Steve Cherundolo. Sounds like they have embraced the fact that Steve Cherundolo is their top target after obviously Jurgen Klopp gets a phone call and then he politely declines. After they offer him the whole country, basically, he'd probably be president too. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, I think they offer Klopp, but I think that's a zero chance there. It's slim to none. And then Steve Cherundolo gets a call and he takes over as the next U.S. men's national team coach. I wouldn't be shocked, which is kind of scary. Again, we've talked about this. It'll be a year and a half until World Cup, but I really don't see him taking over until he's done with his time in LAFC. So I think they'll announce it. I think they'll announce soon, within the week or two, that Steve Cherundolo will be the head coach of the U.S. men's national team, which I love. I know a lot of people are very like, "Well, he's MLS. This is the same thing that they did for Greg." He is not Gregg Berhalter. Gregg Berhalter didn't have like, I mean, he won an MLS Cup because he was able to get the underdog of Columbus to fight back, and he's been part of some successful teams. But Steve Cherundolo is probably arguably the best coach in. I mean, Tata is going to get some shout. Pat Noonan will get shouts, but it's hard to beat Steve Cherundolo in my opinion. Steve's got obviously experience with the U.S. men's national team, played for U.S. He's got experience with young players, developing young players. He was in Hanover's system. Jordan has had some thoughts on this. He's very excited about Steve, and so am I. People on Twitter, obviously, they're going to overreact because they think we should go out and get Jurgen Klopp, when that's probably not realistic. If Jurgen Klopp is the head coach and you're currently listening to this, then we're probably so overjoyed that we haven't recorded in like weeks. No, but I think seriously, I think Steve Cherundolo is the kind of hire I expected the U.S. men's national team to make off of Gregg Berhalter not getting us past the round of 16 in the World Cup. Like that's what I expected, a better coach. And Steve Cherundolo is probably one of the, if not the best, is the best U.S. based coach as far as MLS is concerned. Sata's not going to coach a national team again, I don't think. And then you've got, um, some other coaches in MLS that I think are really good, but I don't think are a good fit. I think Steve Cherundolo, players are going to really like him. They love him at LAFC. He's had a tremendous run at LAFC with no coaching experience on the professional level. People are like, well, you just said they didn't have experience. He's got great experience now. He's coached LAFC for a couple of years now. He's won a ton. He's currently got the hottest team in MLS. He's going to have probably an MLS Cup or Supporter Shield if things go right, and they challenge Miami. They're going to go up against Lionel Messi team. I think they can beat Miami. Um, and again, he's done this in such a nice way. He's certified UEFA coach. Like he can coach European teams. He's got that certification. He's got that knowledge. He's been in European systems in Hanover, coaching their 15-year-olds. Like The dude's got experience. He's coached in a ton of different places, just not at the highest of levels until recently. In 2 years, he's got a 65 wins, 19 losses, and 32 draws. I believe that's how that's just kind of broken down. Um, but he's won 65 games, including an MLS Cup and a Supporter Shield. So these people that say like he's not had success, and then they're going to go, well, it's MLS. It is really hard to win MLS Cup and a Supporter Shield in 2 years. Like, that's unheard of in MLS. So and they're only gonna get better. They've got Olivier Giroud coming in. But I feel like this is a perfect fit for US men's national team. Um, there's a lot of speculation too about, like, how LAFC's play against better teams. Well, clearly better because they've won. They've won titles, right? So, they've got trophies. He's way better than Gregg Berhalter, and the players are gonna like him better, I think. And I think he's got more I think he has more organization. I think he's gonna have more discipline. I think he's used to coaching higher level talents at this point. He had to deal with Gareth Bale. I mean, anybody that has to deal with Gareth Bale should be awarded something. Um, but yeah, Gregg Berhalter sounds like he is out. Sounds like Steve Cherundolo is the front runner and far and away the front runner. Does Steve accept it? I think so. I think he's done enough in MLS where he's like, you know what? I think a dream would be to coach the USMNT because it's an intriguing offer. Like, I think, I think maybe if this was a different year and Klopp was available, not after he's kind of burnt out, I think he would at least have taken a little bit longer of a phone call. I think right now they've reached out to him by now and he's gone, yeah, no, I want a break. I want like a real break. I think he takes a real break. I think he coaches the German team at some point. But um yeah, I don't know. I think people are thinking we're going to get that kind of quote. You're never going to get that kind of coach. Not until the US Federation offers a ton of cash, which they don't seem willing to do right now. You go and offer Klopp an offer he can't refuse, then maybe you'll prove us wrong. But I doubt they do that. It's just not been their game. They're going to offer a reasonable contract, better than Greg's, I think, but I think you pay Steve a little bit more. And I love that. I love that hire. I do. I think he's a gamer. He's hard nosed. He's hard nosed as a player. He's hard nosed as a coach. He's had some bad teams that he's coached. He's had some really good teams that he's coached. So I think he's done it all. And I think he's ready. I really do. So I'm not like overjoyed, but I'm happy. I think that that's a good hire if he ends up being the U.S. men's national team coach. So you might know in the future. I'm excited to see what's ahead for the U.S. men's national team because it does sound. I doubt that the U.S. comes out and says they're going to make a decision on Greg by next week and they keep him. I just don't see where that benefits them. If anything, they would have stayed quiet and let things happen, and he would still be the coach. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. I'm going to go through the games that we have coming up, maybe talk a little bit about some Copa. You've got Canadian national team. You probably know how they did if you're listening to this already. Right now, you've got some U.S. Open Cup games going on. Atlanta United is currently uh, level with Indy 11. Argentina and Canada tonight at 8 p.m. at MetLife. Go Canada. Really excited for Jesse Marsh. Should have hired him. Sacramento Republic will play Seattle tonight at 11 p.m. In Sacramento. You've got tomorrow Forge FC in Toronto playing in the Canadian Championship at Tim Hortons Field. Go Toronto. Let's go. Forge would be fun too, but root for MLS. Uruguay and Colombia. That'll be a great match. That's that's in Copa at Bank of America Stadium on July 10th tomorrow at 8 p.m. Kansas City and Dallas play an Open Cup game tomorrow at 9 p.m. at Children's Mercy. Pacific FC playing the Canadian Championship against Vancouver at Starlight. LAFC and New Mexico play in U.S. Open Cup at BMO Field at 11 p.m. tomorrow. Saturday, July 13th, Cincinnati at TQL Stadium against Charlotte. DC at Audi Field against Nashville at 7:30. These are all 7:30 games. Montreal at home against Atlanta. New England at home against Orlando. Toronto at home against Philly. And then at 8:30, Austin at home against Seattle. Chicago 8:30 at home against NYCFC. Dallas 8:30 against LA Galaxy at home. Houston at home if all things have cleared up from that hurricane, which they should be by then. It's a couple days. Houston host Minnesota at 8:30. St. Louis 8:30. Vancouver at City Park, and then at 9:30 you've got Colorado hosting New York Red Bull. At 10:25, that's odd. 10:25 you've got Portland hosting RSL. LAFC hosting Columbus at 10:30, and then San Jose 10:30 hosting Sporting Kansas City. Those are two really good games. Those 10:30 games. Well, beside 10:25 and 10:30. Portland versus RSL is going to be a really good game. Portland's been hot. Portland can't stop anybody from scoring, so RSL is going to score a lot of goals. Portland's going to have the match, and then LA Galaxy against Columbus. LAFC against Columbus is one of the best games I think we've had in a couple of weeks because Columbus has been pretty good lately. They've been charging up the Eastern Conference, and they play the hottest team in soccer. And yeah, some interesting matchups, right? Cincinnati and Charlotte's pretty interesting. Seattle and Austin, they're kind of in that weird spot where they could go either way and make the playoffs, right? So Austin's sitting there still, yeah, in the 9th spot. So yeah, Western Conference is a mess after the playoff line, but looking forward to the games this week. Looking forward to having Jordan back. I think he might return next week. I know we're trying to record a Star Wars podcast. We have a Star Wars podcast if you want to go listen to The Pod Awakens, Star Wars chronological rewatch of the Clone Wars, where Jordan and I talk Clone Wars. And he talks all things Star Wars with other guests. He's been talking the Acolyte, so that's been something that's going on. So if you want to go listen to some Star Wars things, go head over to that and follow that. Jordan's got 26 podcasts and a son. So yeah, congratulations again, Jordan. And this has been fun hosting, and it'll be good to have a co-host back because my mouth gets really dry having to talk a ton. But yeah, thanks for listening. If you want to give us a follow, we are at Stateside Show on Twitter, at Stateside Soccer Show on Facebook, the Stateside Soccer Show over on X, not X, that's the wrong one, Instagram. We don't really post a whole lot on Instagram. You can also find us anywhere you can get podcasts. We're on YouTube at the Stateside Soccer Show. So if you want to see us in real life and you want to see our faces and how we react to these things, you can subscribe over there. Drop some likes, drop some comments, rate us over on podcast or Apple Podcast and Spotify. Helps people find us. Other than that, thanks for listening. It was match day 25. We are on to match day 26, and we will see you guys next week. And yeah, it might be without Gregg Berhalter. So see you soon.